We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Rescue work goes on. Hello again, and tonight most of Newsround will be about the terrible tragedy on board an oil platform in the North Sea. Hope is now fading for nearly 150 men still missing after what looks like being the worst disaster ever in the search for oil and gas in those dangerous waters. The men were on a giant platform called the Alpha Piper when suddenly it was swept by fire and blown apart by massive explosions. Almost 20 hours later, the fire is still burning, sending smoke hundreds of meters into the air. Nearly 70 men managed to escape. There was no time to reach the lifeboats. Many of them jumped 60 meters into the sea and were taken to safety by helicopters. The Piper Alpha platform is 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen and 100 miles south of the Orkney Islands. A pipeline carried the oil and gas it found back to the mainland. That has now been closed. John takes up the story.
This was Piper Alpha before the tragedy, one of the biggest, oldest and most successful platforms in the North Sea. And today, this is all that can be seen of it. A huge plume of smoke on the left of the picture, rising into the clouds. Rescue ships and helicopters were soon at the scene. The sea was calm but icy cold, and many survivors owe their lives to the speed at which help reached them. The search for their missing colleagues still goes on. Early this morning, helicopters brought many of the injured to hospital in Aberdeen. Some could walk, others were taken by stretcher. 8 of them have very serious burns, but more than 40 others were able to leave hospital after treatment. One of the surgeons who was flown out to a rescue ship told how one group of men escaped.
There was a small group of men who sought refuge in a relatively unscathed part of the rig. They described to me that the air there was fresher, it was cooler. They remained there for some time. A second explosion occurred, and they decided then to evacuate.
Many stories of great bravery have still to be told, and among those feared dead are 2 rescuers reported missing after they set out in a life raft to search for survivors.
And on the line now is BBC reporter Jeremy Bowen, who's in Aberdeen. Hello, Jeremy. What's the latest news? Any hope of any survivors now?
Well, the hospital chaplain who I was speaking to just a few moments ago said he didn't think there would be many more survivors now because of the fact that it's been so long since the disaster happened. The precise figures are these. Police say that 67 people survived the explosions, but they say 167 are still unaccounted for. The search, though, is going on in the area around the rig. 15 helicopters and 28 surface ships are continuing to search the North Sea, but it has to be said it's now rather a desperate situation, but they're still hunting.
Well, it's very nice of you to join us, Jeremy. Thank you very much. As the scale of this latest and worst disaster sinks in, there have been many messages of sympathy. Among the first was from the Queen, who was shocked to hear what had happened and sent her heartfelt sympathy to the injured and to those who have lost their loved ones. There's to be a big inquiry into the disaster which happened less than 2 weeks after government safety checks. Meanwhile, the BBC's correspondent, James Wilkinson, has been looking at what might have caused the explosion.
The Piper platform is made of steel and weighs 34,000 tons. It's fixed to the seabed in water about 150 meters deep. It's a huge structure, as this comparison with Big Ben shows. The oil is produced like this. The hot oil and gas mixture comes up from under the seabed in pipes. At the top, the mixture is separated. The oil is pumped to shore along one pipeline. The gas is prepared in this area so that it can be pumped to shore along another pipeline. To cause such massive explosions, there would have had to be a major gas leak and a spark or something to set the gas on fire. So how might it have happened? There might have been a small explosion to start with near the place where the workers live, which in turn might have caused a big gas pipe to break, leading to a big explosion. The platform was old, so the metal in the pipes might have become weak. A break in one of the main pipes from the seabed could have released a lot of gas. The gas is mainly methane. A mixture of air and gas containing very little methane is highly explosive. The smallest spark could set it off. Getting oil from the sea has always been very dangerous. More than 280 men have died working in the North Sea. The worst disaster till now happened 8 years ago. 137 men were killed when a platform turned over in a storm. The North Sea oil field is reckoned to have some of the highest safety standards in the world. All oil workers receive special safety training. Their trade unions, though, have been campaigning for even more to be done. But most people in the oil industry agree that there are bound to be great risks working in such perilous waters.
And now to other news. A Russian spacecraft is due to blast off shortly on a mission to Phobos, a tiny moon circling Mars. It's the first of 2 probes which could pave the way for a manned mission to the distant planet. The spacecraft took off from the Russian Space Center at Baikonur with a long journey ahead of it. It'll take more than 6 months to travel the 120 million miles to Mars. More than 12 countries, including America, are taking part in the Phobos mission. The second probe is due to take off next week. The spacecraft will spend 4 months studying the tiny potato-shaped moon. Hovering less than 40 meters away, it'll fire laser beams to stir up the dust on the surface. Then the soil will be analysed to see what it's made of. The spacecraft will also send down 2 modules to actually land on the moon. The Russians hope that this mission will lead to a manned flight to Mars early next century. In Egypt, work has begun to save the country's most famous monument, the Sphinx. Experts were called when a huge chunk fell off the statue, which has stood guard over the pyramids in the desert.
The giant Proton rocket carrying instruments from 13 different countries heads first for the Martian moon Phobos. 2 probes will be dropped onto the surface of the moon to transmit data back to Earth. It then flies on to the planet Mars itself to begin a 3-month study in preparation for a manned flight early in the next century. The Russians hope the Americans will finally join them in putting the first man on Mars.
They were Baikonur Cosmodrome in Central Asia on Tuesday. Scientists from throughout Europe, both East and West, are collaborating in a range of experiments, and the United States is providing radio tracking for the probes. It was at the Moscow summit in May that the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev invited the United States to join Moscow in the next stage of the mission to Mars. David Koss reports.
9:38 Moscow time, and the massive Proton rocket carrying its twin spacecraft blasted off on a 200-day voyage to Mars. Mission Control in Moscow was so confident of its technology that the launch was shown live on Soviet television. But as the Proton soared out of sight over Soviet Central Asia, tension gripped the scientists. The rocket was reduced to a dot on a monitoring screen. Then the separation of the first stage, greeted with a modest smattering of applause. Mars is 40 million miles away. That's some 200 times as far as man's first momentous journey to another world, the trip to the moon. It will take 7 months to reach the red planet. On the way there, the spacecraft will study the sun, including the solar wind and the little understood phenomenon of the solar flares, which affect the weather on Earth. When they arrive at Mars in the new year, the twin spacecraft will study the red planet for about 4 months. They'll transmit colour television views, as well as infrared surveys of the warm and cool areas of the planet. This should reveal whether there's any permafrost, frozen ground under the surface, which could provide water to fuel future expeditions. One spacecraft will skim the Martian surface just a few hundred kilometers high, studying the little-known magnetic field of the planet. These observations done, one of the 20-ton craft will set off for Phobos, at 17 miles across, minute by comparison to its parent planet.
the most dramatic stage of the Phobos mission, the orbiting, approach, and hovering at 50 meters with remote sensing of the Phobos surface.
Radar will plumb 600 feet into Phobos to reveal its internal structure. Laser pulses will evaporate the soil. An ion beam will bombard the surface. The results will be analysed and beamed back to Earth.
This is going to be the first time that we're going to have space missions launched specifically to look at Phobos. Is it going to be a hard rocky surface underneath the dust layer that we believe exists there? Or is it going to be a fairly soft material? At the moment, nobody knows.
The first module to land will be the hopper. Its job is to collect and analyse samples of the dusty soil. It'll bound across the surface in 20-metre jumps, collecting as it goes. The second module is called a Long-Term Autonomous Station, or LAS. It will dig itself in, and once anchored, it'll measure seismic activity and the effect of the Martian gravitational pull on Phobos. The purpose of all this is to assess whether Mars and its moons could become bases for wider space exploration. Their low gravity and locked-in ice could hold the key to the next frontier.
If that water can be detected and can be split into its constituent parts of hydrogen and oxygen, then that provides a very efficient rocket fuel. Phobos has a very low gravity field, and therefore to get that rocket fuel away you need to expend very little energy. So by mining rocket fuel on Phobos you can open up the whole of the outer solar system for manned exploration.
Down on Earth there's another problem: money. A full-blown mission to Mars could cost $100 billion. That means a joint project by the superpowers. Mr. Gorbachev proposed just that in May, but America, still recovering from the tragic interruption of its space shuttle program, has so far seemed reluctant.
I think eventually the Russians and Americans will go to Mars together, because the cost of such a mission like this is so expensive that neither side could afford really to do it alone. But I think in the short term the Americans won't agree, because they don't want to be seen to following the political lead of the Russians, and they would much prefer that this mission was over and done with and that things would die down for a while, and then they could both emerge as equal partners in the mission towards Mars.
But Mars sets its own timetable for exploration, and there's time yet for America and Russia to get together.
Well, the opportunities to go to Mars arise every 2 years when a launch window arises, and Russia will take very full advantage of the launch windows in the 1990s. They're going to send a space probe which is going to orbit Mars. They're going to put a balloon on the surface of Mars to float around to take measurements. They may well have a Mars rover to actually crawl around the surface taking measurements, and also a spacecraft to actually return a sample of Martian soil. And it's the final space program, the return of a Martian sample, which may have substantial American involvement.
America is providing the monitoring stations to track the probes in today's mission. Technical expertise and hardware has also come from a dozen East and West European countries. It needs an international effort greater even than that, say the experts, if mankind is to meet the challenge of Mars, our only neighbour in space which might, in the 21st century, support a human colony.
David Cost reporting. Well, now a quick look at tomorrow's papers, and of course they all lead on the same story. The Times has smoking North Sea wreck where 166 perished. The Star, heroes of hell, the rescue that went back again. Today, tombstone for 167 brave men. The Mirror, the tomb. And the Sun, fry and die, or jump and try. Well, that's all from Newsnight on a very sad day. We'll be back tomorrow at 10:25, but for the moment, for myself and all of us on the programme, good night.
Analysis. The development costs were too great for Britain to shoulder on its own. The two British companies, Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace, who so far developed Hotol, are now considering whether to carry on with it. Supporters of Hotol say it could put payloads into space for a fraction of the cost of the American space shuttle and could carry passengers from London to Australia in 45 minutes.
Which could reduce the cost of launching satellites. It says the cost of it is too high. But the government says it will support efforts by Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace to find international partners to back the project.
It was designed as a revolutionary new space plane, launching satellites at a fraction of the cost of rockets. With its air-breathing engine, it would take off like an aeroplane and switch over to its own oxygen supply when it left the atmosphere. Now, it seems, HOTOL may have been permanently grounded. 2 years ago, the government provided £3 million for British Aerospace and Rolls-Royce to find out if the concept would work. They concluded it would and wanted more money to develop the technology. Today, the government refused that extra money and urged the companies to seek partners abroad. Government critics see it as further evidence that Britain does not see much future in bold space projects. The government recently withdrew from the European shuttle known as Hermes and the big version of the Ariane rocket, though Britain is still putting money into the Columbus space platform. HOTOL would cost up to £6,000 million to develop. It could only be done with international collaboration, but without British government backing, it might be hard to convince foreign governments it's a worthwhile project. British Aerospace will now probably try to get HOTOL off the secret list so it can talk more freely to potential industrial partners abroad.
The money could far better be spent on other projects. SDP leader Dr. David Owen said the government had taken a deplorably short-sighted decision. He urged the Prime Minister to declassify the patents and allow HOTOL to be developed privately. In Yorkshire, HOTOL's inventor, Alan Bond, gave his reaction to the decision.
Very, very bitter. I can only really say that. It's really deep felt resentment at the sort of people that we have in government. Well, let me be specific. Mrs. Thatcher and Mr. Kenneth Clarke, really bitter resentment that people that are supposed to be directing this country to a better future really can see no more than counting the change in the...
But a further setback at Cape Canaveral. The engines of the brand new shuttlecraft Discovery were due to have been started up this morning for the first time. NASA regarded it as an important demonstration of the project's competence. But with 5 seconds to go to ignition, the engines had to be shut down. A computer had found a fault. NASA had been hoping to launch Discovery into space next month. The mission will be the first since the loss of the shuttle Challenger and her 7 astronauts. Today's failure means those plans will have to be postponed.
It's taken 2.5 slow years to get a shuttle to the launch pad and prepare it for this, the major ground simulation. At dawn this morning, final checks on the orbiter Discovery for what NASA called a stress test of the entire system. In the final seconds, the onboard computers took over from shuttle control.
12, 11, 10, we have a go for main engine start. 7, we have a cutoff. We have cutoff of the start sequence.
Shuttle controllers ordered the immediate emptying of the liquid fuel tanks, and it wasn't clear when the count would be restarted. Experts, though, weren't surprised by the failure.
NASA, I think quite properly, wants to make sure that when they do launch that it will be a successful mission, because really the entire future of America's space program is hinging on this launch.
The task for NASA personnel has been to relearn spaceflight in the aftermath of the Challenger disaster. It's meant a grueling schedule testing new safety procedures and more than 100 technical modifications, mainly to the booster rockets that failed last time.
2, 1, fire.
This morning, NASA blamed the shuttle failure on a fuel valve that did not close fast enough on command, the latest in a series of setbacks. But NASA refuses to put back its launch deadline a month from now.
Can you make September?
Yeah, Kathy, I think we can still make September. I do.
Watching today's launch were 10 Russian arms inspectors who announced a sudden visit yesterday, ostensibly to monitor more secret missile facilities. Experts point out that the Soviet shuttle is experiencing similar difficulties. It's not clear whose will fly first. This is Tim Sebastian for the 6 o'clock news in Washington.
There's been yet another setback for the American space shuttle Discovery. Its launch has had to be delayed yet again, this time because a vital engine test firing today went wrong. Now it looks as though the first launch since the Challenger disaster 2.5 years ago won't go ahead until October at the earliest. This latest test had already been delayed 3 times because of technical problems and was running 5 days late. But scientists hoped that at last it could go ahead. They'd stopped a gas leak that had been worrying them, and thousands of tons of explosive fuel were loaded ready for the firing. The countdown went off without a hitch until there was just 5 seconds left.
We have a cutoff. We have cutoff of the start sequence.
One of the engines was closed down by its computer. Immediately after the shutdown, work started to make the shuttle safe. But meanwhile, space experts of a different kind have discovered a new planet, and it's the first time they've found one that doesn't go round our own sun. Scientists say it's about 30,000 times bigger than Earth and several hundred degrees hotter. Terry has the details.
The new planet lies about 90 light years from Earth. That's about 522 trillion miles away. It orbits a star called HD 114762, which lies right on the edge of our galaxy and can't be seen by the naked eye. Like our own sun, it's a star and extremely hot. And because the new planet is so close to it, experts think it's unlikely that any kind of life could survive there. The planet takes 84 days to go round its sun. Earth orbits our sun in just over 365 days. Scientists called astronomers are always searching for new stars and planets. They've known about HD 114762 for years, but until now they completely missed the new planet. Like our own sun, HD 114762 gives off a dazzling light, which blocked out the light from the new planet, making it impossible to see. Astronomers said it's just like trying to see a flame like this one in the glare of a spotlight. They only made their discovery when the star wobbled because of the pull of gravity from the orbiting planet. Some astronomers say they don't believe the new discovery really is a planet, because they can't see it properly. But others, like Ian Ridpath of Popular Astronomy magazine, are very excited.
Oh, I think it's a very exciting discovery indeed, because the more planets there are out there, then the more number of potential places there are for life to exist. Well, it's an additional piece of evidence that there are probably lots of planetary systems out there in space going around other stars.
The new planet will be named soon, and experts hope this will be just the first of many exciting discoveries.
The test firing of Discovery's engines was halted just 5 seconds before ignition when a computer located a faulty valve. It means the shuttle flight planned for September, the first launch since the crash of Challenger in January 1986 when 7 crew were killed, will be delayed until October at the earliest.
It was a very public setback for NASA. Millions of Americans watching on breakfast television this morning as the countdown into the crucial test firing of the shuttle's main engines reached its final seconds.
10, we have a go for main engine start. 7, we have a cutoff. We have cutoff of the start sequence.
To the dismay of NASA engineers, an onboard computer had aborted the test. A successful firing depends on hundreds of carefully timed sequences, all falling into place.
Our best guess now is one of those sequences did not get the go signal, so as a result, the entire 3 engines did not start.
NASA has already announced a delay of at least 72 hours before they can again try to test fire the 3 main engines, which cost $40 million each. The event had been widely touted as a major milestone in America's return to manned space flight. Shuttle managers had given the go-ahead for the test, despite a series of problems, including a hydrogen leak. Now it's certain that the shuttle launch date, set for September, will be much delayed.
Well, it'll have a ripple effect on everything else that needs to get done, and I would expect the first launch, or the launch cannot occur now probably until early October.
And even that date can only be achieved if everything works perfectly from now on. Ken Rees, ITN, Washington.
In Ulster, the Democratic Unionist leader Ian Paisley has called on the Northern Ireland Secretary Tom King
That America's space program was back on track. As millions watched on breakfast time television, NASA prepared for a 20-second test firing of the shuttle's main engines. But with seconds to go, it became a public embarrassment.
10, we have a go for main engine start. 7, we have a cutoff. We have cutoff of the start sequence.
As the test ended in a puff of smoke and a shower of sparks, there was despair in mission control. It seems a sluggish 1-inch fuel valve had closed too slowly, upsetting the intricate launch sequence.
Our best guess now is one of those sequences did not get the go signal, so as a result, the entire 3 engines did not start, and so there was no ignition of any of the engines.
It will be at least Sunday before the crucial test firing can be attempted again. It could take much longer to fix the problem. As one official said, it's so long since we've flown that it's like trying to run a car after 2.5 years up on blocks in a garage. The test is a vital milestone on the way to a relaunch and has already suffered several delays. A leak in a launch pad fuel line still isn't fixed, and there's a more serious problem. Another leak, this time in a fuel line identical to this one, deep in the shuttle steering pod. To avoid moving Discovery off the pad, engineers plan to cut a 20-inch hole through the back wall of the cargo bay. Workers will crawl inside and try to stop the gas leak with a special sealant called Firmanite, flown in from a British company in Kendal, Cumbria. Today's test had to go flawlessly for NASA to have any chance at all of meeting their target date of September for a Discovery launch. After today, even the optimists are saying it could be mid-October at the earliest before America gets back into space. Ken Reese, News at 10, Washington.
Some scientists believe the discovery of a new planet has increased the chances of finding other forms of life in space. The new planet is the first to be detected outside our own solar system, and astronomers think there must be thousands more like it.
Our star, the Sun, was born in a gas cloud and the dust formed into planets. In a vast galaxy, logic suggests we are not alone on Earth, and now for the first time comes evidence of a new planet outside our solar system. 90 light-years away from Earth is an orange-coloured star or sun known as HD 114762, and the new unnamed planet revolves around it. The Earth is 150 million miles from our sun. The new planet is much bigger than Earth and much nearer its sun, so it's like an oven.
Well, you certainly aren't going to send out the Starship Enterprise to start looking for life on this planet. It's a long ways from being like an Earth-like planet.
The new planet can't be seen, and it was discovered because a telescope detected a wobble in its sun. Scientists know that only happens when the gravitational pull of an orbiting planet makes its sun move slightly, and that wobble can be translated into a computerized display. The find outside our solar system means millions of stars in the Milky Way could have their own planets and possibly a form of life.
The chances of finding life now, I think, are much improved over what we thought before. Now that we found a planet around another star, then I think it does show that there are very many planets around which can possibly support life.
So far, man has made only a small step into his own solar system.
The final countdown had begun over 13 hours earlier. After last Thursday's test, it had to be aborted a split second before ignition when a computer sensor mistakenly reported a valve was not closing properly. NASA engineers had decided to replace the entire unit. After more modifications and checks, Discovery's 3 main engines finally roared into life.
We have main engine start. The motor's up and running. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
As water poured over the base of the launch pad to protect it from the intense heat, the firing, with over 1 million pounds of thrust, lasted just 22 seconds, a fraction of the 8 minutes they'll need to fire to put the shuttle into orbit. The countdown wasn't completely flawless. Several hours before the firing, a liquid oxygen pump failed and they'd had to switch it to a backup. But NASA officials congratulated the launch team on a job well done.
It was a very smooth count and it led to a very successful operation. We had some very, for us, some minor problems as we do in every count. Our LOX pump problem reoccurred. We sort of expected. We had it instrumented. And we think we gathered enough data that we can really nail down the problem on the LOX pump.
Last Thursday's failed test was just the latest in a long line of setbacks.
We have a cutoff.
A gas leak still has to be repaired, and the last major hurdle before a possible launch, the redesigned solid-fuel booster rocket, has to be test-fired next week. A faulty booster rocket joint was blamed for the explosion that destroyed Challenger in 1986.
The Challenger disaster, coupled with Discovery's problems, have put the American space program back by years, with planetary exploration hardest hit. Also delayed, a plan to launch a huge space telescope aboard Discovery, which would give astronomers views towards the edge of the universe. Although NASA officials weren't committing themselves today to a launch date, they're still hoping for late September. This is Linda Lewis for the 6 o'clock news in Washington.
The test has been delayed 5 times and last week was abandoned with seconds to go. The 22nd firing was a vital test in the lead-up to the first manned space mission since the Challenger disaster 2.5 years ago. If there are no further problems, Discovery could be launched in late September.
On the shuttle launch pad, engineers had spent the night pumping 500,000 gallons of supercold liquid hydrogen and oxygen into Discovery's main fuel tank. This is the second attempt to fire the main engines. Last Thursday, the test fizzled out in a shower of sparks after a sticking valve moved too slowly and computers shut the test down. This morning at NASA's Mission Control at Cape Canaveral, tension was high. Under their new safety-first policy, a poll has to be conducted among mission managers before the countdown is allowed to proceed to the final stage. They all gave the thumbs up.
10, we have a go for main engine start. 7, 6, we have main engine start. The motor's up and running.
At first sight, it seemed the test had gone perfectly, the huge $40 million engines apparently performing well. Engineers will now be examining computer records to ensure that the hundreds of complex procedures leading to the firing did work correctly. But so far, the signs are good.
Fired at Cape Canaveral today. NASA now says that 2.5 years after the Challenger disaster, a space shuttle should soon be back in orbit.
The final countdown had begun over 13 hours earlier. After last Thursday's test, it had to be aborted a split second before ignition when a computer sensor mistakenly reported a valve was not closing properly. NASA engineers had decided to replace the entire unit. After more modifications and checks, Discovery's 3 main engines finally roared into life.
We have main engine start. The motor's up and running. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
As water poured over the base of the launch pad to protect it from the intense heat, the firing, with over 1 million pounds of thrust, lasted just 22 seconds, a fraction of the 8 minutes they'll need to fire to put the shuttle into orbit. The countdown wasn't completely flawless. Several hours before the firing, a liquid oxygen pump failed and they'd had to switch it to a backup. But NASA officials congratulated the launch team on a job well done.
It was a very smooth count and it led to a very successful operation. We had some very, for us, some minor problems as we do in every count. Our LOX pump problem reoccurred. We sort of expected. We had it instrumented. And we think we gathered enough data that we can really nail down the problem on the LOX pump.
Last Thursday's failed test was just the latest in a long line of setbacks.
We have a cutoff.
A gas leak still has to be repaired, and the last major hurdle before a possible launch, the redesigned solid fuel booster rocket, has to be test fired next week. This is Linda Lewis for the 9 o'clock news in Washington.